All right, we are live. This is Attorney Vincent Davis, and this is The Secret: How to Fight Child Protective Services and Win. I'm joined tonight by some special guests here. We have Miss G, Georgette Shrewin. We have Cassandra. Cassandra, how are you?
Good.
And
How are you?
we have someone I don't think I've met, Jessica Ruckman. Jessica, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. What county and state are you in?
San Diego, California.
Oh,
San
you're
Diego.
here.
Yes.
Do you have? Were you involved in a CPS case in San Diego?
Yes. Yes, I was.
Was your case in Meadowlark or someplace else?
East County.
Oh, you're East County with.
Yes.
Well, I won't say his name, but he's a very well-known judge out there.
Yes, he is.
Do you still have a case going on?
It's looking like jurisdiction is going to be terminated very shortly here. So I'm on the ending in scope of it.
So, do you have your children back with you?
I have the child originally involved back in my care. Yes.
Okay, that's very good.
Yes.
Very, very good. How would you rate your experience with CPS on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the greatest thing in life?
And a 1, if that's the lowest I can go.
Okay, that's about the lowest you can go. I guess you could go. Well, yeah, I said 1 to 10.
Yes.
How long was your case open?
Since November 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna get back to you, but if you have any questions, please let me know. Please think of some questions that might benefit you or the audience. Before we go too much further, this show is nationwide, worldwide actually, because it's a live stream on social media platforms. I think there's 8 platforms we're on this evening. I want to say a prayer for those folks in Florida. I've been watching the news, and it's bad with a capital B. So prayers going out to everyone that lives in Florida. And it seems like that hurricane is affecting the entire state. It's so large and so wide. So hopefully they're going to make it through without too many problems. But it doesn't look good from what I'm seeing on the news. All right. So, Miss Cassandra, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. What's going on with you today?
Not much. And got to talk to my kids today, so I'm happy about that.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I didn't know this, but the other night you said that your kids are older. Didn't you say that?
Yes.
Typically when children are older, it's easier for you to get them back home. You and I should have a private conversation so I can give you some tips and pointers on what to do, because I've talked to you several times. I've been on these live streams with several times, and I have to be honest. You don't seem like the type of person that would be a danger to kids, especially teenagers. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering like what's going on with her case. What county and state are you in?
San Bernardino, California.
Oh, okay. So you're over there on Gilbert Street or Gilbert Avenue. Yeah.
Just so you know, she's really good people, Cassandra. She's very smart. She's very witty. She's an artist. I just love her. Like, seriously, she's like, I don't know what to tell you. She's amazing.
Cassandra, you're an artist?
Yes.
Like drawing or sculpting or
Painting.
what? Painting. Okay. Oils, watercolor, acrylic?
Acrylic.
Oh, okay. Do you have any like paintings you've done that you sell or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Actually, I have like my mom uses her whole house, decorates her whole house with my paintings sometimes. And I've actually given a lot of paintings away because I paint so much. I haven't really sold anything, but they're actually really good.
It's something that she uses to heal, like to help her, basically.
Cassandra, about 15, 20 years ago, a distant relative of mine who always, drew and painted and stuff, started selling his stuff on the internet. And today it's a full-time, business for him. You've never heard of him. And if I told you his name, you probably never have heard of him, but he sells his stuff on the internet. And, his paintings range anywhere from like 750 to 1500 to $3,000, stuff like that. But, that's what he does for a living. I mean, he enjoys doing it. And when he does it, he just puts it on the internet and, people buy it.
Yeah.
So
I was actually going to try to do something like that, but just I haven't had the time with jobs and trying to get my girls back and visitations and stuff like that. I just haven't had a time to make, because I was making a website. I was actually going to start my own business with that, but I didn't have time.
So do you live in San Bernardino County?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So if we wanted to have a meeting with Miss Truan, I mean, it's kind of like you're in the area.
Yeah.
Okay, very good, very good. All right, Miss G, what's going on with you today?
Wait, what? Have a meeting with Miss Truan? What do you mean by that?
I said, how are you doing today?
I'm, I'm doing fabulous. Just
It
great.
wasn't a trick question, believe it or not.
I'm doing great, Mr. Davis.
Good, good, good. Does anybody have any questions they want me to answer before we move on with the show?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay, what could you explain to everyone what when the judge may set an interim hearing, what does interim mean?
No, it's interim.
Interim, wherever. Interim.
Yeah.
Interim.
Usually interim hearings are non-statutory hearings where the judge wants to get a progress or some type of report or keep an eye on a case, so they have the hearing more frequently. Theoretically, the only hearings that are allowed in juvenile court are the statutory hearings. That's the detention hearing, the jurisdictional and dispositional hearing, the 6-month review, the 12-month review, the 18-month review, the termination or the selection and implementation hearing where they try to terminate your rights. Those are all statutory hearings. Interim hearings are usually progress reports, hearings that a judge has to keep an eye on something. Could be the parent's progress, could be the child's progress, could be, notice for a particular hearing coming up.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, I don't know if it's still the case, but CPS was generally really bad at giving notices for 2-6 hearings, the selection and implementation hearing. And a lot of those hearings always had to be continued because the notice that was required to be given by the social worker to the parents was never or rarely done appropriately. And so a lot of judges started having interim hearings just to check on, to make sure that the notice was proper for the hearing coming up. So, they could be significant hearings or they could be, just pro forma hearings. It depends. Should you be at an interim hearing, I would suggest that you always go to the hearing, to see what's going on. I get a lot of people that tell me, hey, my attorney told me I didn't have to come to this hearing. And that might be accurate. I just advise people don't miss any hearings because sometimes, things come up that nobody thought were going to come up and you don't have any input if you're not there. For an example, there might be an interim hearing on the progress of the mother in her visitation or progress in maybe getting the child back early, something like that. And then all of a sudden, at that hearing, they start talking about the father. And if the father's not there and his attorney's, not prepared, they could be orders that could be made could be really affect the case. Now, should that happen? No, I don't think so, but it does.
Okay. What advice can you give somebody? Because I'm getting a lot of those calls today where they're calling me and telling me that they had a reunification period. So basically, the social worker tells them, and that's everybody that I speak with, by the way. The social worker tells them that they're going to have reunification services with their children. But then all of a sudden, the reunification is like 5 months ahead or 4 months ahead or 3 months ahead. And then the social worker comes at the last minute and recommend to the court that there should be a TPR.
Okay,
I
so
don't know.
I'm really not following that
Okay, so
because let me tell you
rehabilitation.
why.
Go ahead.
Let me tell you why.
Okay.
When people ask me questions, I think in terms of the code, the law.
Hmm.
And sometimes, people ask questions because they're confused about what was said in court, what type of hearing is coming up, what's really before the judge on this particular day. I'll give you an example. The question you just asked me. You asked me what is a something hearing, and the name of the hearing is interim hearing, right? So whoever asked you that question didn't even have the right name of the hearing. And that's just indicative of people asking me questions or asking you questions that a lot of them don't make sense.
Okay.
So make sure that, I try to get everyone to get their last few minute orders before we talk so I can get some type of background, because inevitably I talk to people and I say, "Oh, what hearing is coming up?" "I don't know, Mr. Davis." And if I don't know what type of hearing is coming up, I don't necessarily have the information to give them advice. Because if it was the first hearing, I'd give you certain information or advice. If it was the fourth hearing, I'd be giving you different types of information and advice. So it really matters what hearing or what module you're in. You just can't come in and ask me a question. I met with someone not today, a couple days ago, and this was his story. He was at what I call stage 5, the selection and implementation hearing, and they wanted to terminate his rights as a father. The problem was he came to me and all he wanted to do was talk about how the case first began.
Hmm.
And I told him, I said, all of that is very interesting, and I'm sorry that this happened to you, but that's not an issue anymore. And he just couldn't understand that. He wanted, I guess nobody had listened to him before, but he wanted to tell me how he got screwed in the beginning of the case. And I kept telling him, well, you better focus on where you are now and try to stop the termination of your rights. Because what has happened, the judge made findings that may or may not have been fair, but the findings were made. And once findings are made and you don't appeal or you don't win your appeal, it's like the 10 Commandments. It's written in stone. And a lot of people come to me at, module 5, and they want to argue about or talk about or try to change what happened in module 1 or 2. Can't be done. Can't be done. Hey, I talked to someone today, by the way. This is as an aside and relates back to our case yesterday. Someone asked me, my rights were terminated. Can I get my children back? What's the answer to that?
Yes, you can.
Georgette, what's the answer to that?
Yes, you can.
Did you know that, Jessica, that if your rights are terminated, that there is a small chance that you could get your children back and your rights reinstated?
I was aware that that's a possibility through dependency and family court.
No family court was involved.
Okay.
You need to watch our show from last night. It's floating around on several social media sites. We actually had a guest whose rights were terminated, 5 years expired, and her children were returned to her and her rights were reinstated. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to happen for most people, and as a matter of fact, it will not happen for most people. But if anybody ever asks you, is there a possibility that you can get your children back after your rights are terminated, there is a possibility. And we got to interview someone about that last night who actually that happened to. And in order to make that happen, I actually referred her to a lawyer who I know, who did the case for her. And yes, she did get her rights reinstated. Georgette, did you have another question for me?
Yes, I do. I always have questions for you, Mr. David. What could you tell people about what to expect from the 12 months review hearing, which is 0.21F and PPH? What do you, I mean, what is 0.21F and PPH stand for?
Okay. So PPH is the old school term of the permanency planning hearing. They don't call it that anymore, and it's actually not a PPH anymore. There's a 366.21F hearing in California where they decide whether to offer you more family reunifications or to stop your family reunification services. And, a lot of people don't realize this, but at the 21F hearing, as in most of the hearings, even the 21E, the judge is supposed to return your children back to you unless the social worker can prove that you're still a risk. And here's what happens with most people. If you don't do your case plan, it's presumed under the evidentiary laws and under the laws that you can't get your children back. However, you can have a trial and prove to the judge that the social worker is wrong and the children should be returned to you. The way the statute is set up in the statutory scheme, it actually is in the parent's favor. A lot of people don't know that because a lot of people go to the 21F hearing and they get advised for whatever reason, hey, let's not have a trial. Let's just agree with the social worker and try to come back in 6 more months or try to file a 388 before we terminate your parental rights.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of parents, go, oh, okay. I tell people, hey, if they're not recommending giving you your children back at a hearing, you need to have a trial to prove that the children should be returned. By the way, even if you don't, or even if you haven't completed all of your services and the social worker recommends the child not be returned, it's just a presumption. And presumptions in the law can be overturned or can be shown not to be true by you testifying and presenting evidence. I give you an example. Parent was supposed to do individual counseling. And at the 21F, the social worker said, nah, she never finished her counseling. Like, can you ever finish counseling? I don't know. She was supposed to do 20 sessions. She had only done 14. Right? And the parent brought in the counselor who testified, about 20 minutes on direct exam by the mother's attorney that the mother was doing great, even though she didn't have 20 sessions. 20 sessions was just something that was thrown out there. Nobody knew if you needed 20, 40, or 10. And the testimony by the therapist led the judge to believe that the mother was no longer a risk to the child and returned the child. Now, unless the mother had a trial to bring forth that witness and to show the judge that the social worker's recommendation was inaccurate, the child or children wouldn't have been returned at the 21F hearing.
Okay.
Jessica, wait, hold on. Jessica, are you raising your hand? Oh, okay.
Okay, so I have another question.
Go ahead, Sandra.
Yeah, you just described my whole situation that I'm having, actually, and I'm so happy like I got that information right now. Because of the fact that, that's what I'm trying to do. I just filed my 388 and I finished half of my case plan. Like, there's one thing that I didn't finish on it, and that's because I don't want to admit guilt. But then prior to that, how you were talking about...
Hold on a second.
Okay.
There are several cases, appellate cases in California, that say you don't have to admit guilt to get your child back.
Well, they want me to do...
What?
Yeah, you don't have to admit guilt.
Yeah, they're wanting me to do classes, and like they did this cookie cutter case plan with me just off of allegations from from somebody, and then I didn't know I could appeal those allegations. So it got set in stone, like you said, like the 10 Commandments. They said that I was a drug user and that I needed to do outpatient drug program and go to NA. And I'm like, well, I really don't want to be around people that are doing drugs or were doing drugs if I'm not doing drugs, and I don't feel like I need to go to those kind of places. Like that would just be,
here's the easy way to win that case, Cassandra. And I've done this before. Go take a hair follicle test.
mm-hmm.
Show that you haven't used drugs in 9 months. Go back as far as you can. Bring the hair follicle test to court with you. Bring the custodian of records of the testing facility to testify as to the accuracy or that it was done, proper procedures. And, I would be shocked if a judge said, well, you still have a drug problem.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't used drugs in 9 months. How could you have a drug problem?
She doesn't even do with drugs.
Right. I mean, your situation, Sandra, that happens to a lot of people a lot of times.
Yep.
I hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
Mr. Davis, they said I use drugs, and the judge believes I do drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest with you, Mr. Davis, I never done a drug in my life. Happens a lot. Did you know that drug tests that you take, the urine drug test that you take, is 5% inaccurate? 5 times out of 100, it's going to be inaccurate.
Mm-hmm.
It'll either show a false positive or a false negative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and certain medications make things pop up too. And I know this for a fact because I've actually had that happen to me. When I was pregnant with my son, mine actually popped up for PCP for the medication I was taking, and I didn't even know what PCP was. I was shocked when they told me, and they ended up finding out that it was my medication.
Here's the problem, and I'm only going to guess from my own experiences. If you're a judge and you're charged with the safety of children, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and some social worker swears that you're a drug addict, unless you can prove by bringing in your own evidence, right? Unless you can prove that, the judge is probably going to go with the social worker.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times I hear about people complaining about corrupt CPS cases or CPS courts, and it's not that at all. What it is it's an adversarial system, and the social worker has a great experienced attorney in the county counsel's office, and you, not so much, right? You, not so much. So therefore, you get rolled over at the hearing or at the trial. And then you want to, not just you, but people want to blame the system.
Oh, I don't blame the system. I blame my attorney fully.
Look, this is an adversarial system. Make no doubt about it.
I'm sorry, what?
This is an adversarial system. Okay? Make no doubt about it. Okay? And if someone has a better lawyer than you have, you're at a disadvantage.
Yes, I agree.
That's not to say that you're going to lose all the time, but you're at an disadvantage, excuse me. You understand?
Mm-hmm.
So I was telling Georgette this a couple weeks ago. This is really significant. Cases are won and lost because of evidence.
I know this. You've told me this so many times.
If you don't have the evidence, don't think you're going to win. And by the way, in California, legal arguments by attorneys or argument by attorneys, it's not evidence. So if you go to a hearing and it's a trial or a contested hearing of some matter, and you don't have any witnesses or documentary evidence that's going to be introduced, know that you're probably going to lose,
Yep.
because the social worker always has evidence. By law, they write reports that the judge must consider.
Mm-hmm.
So they got evidence. You have no evidence. All you have is your lawyer arguing. So you have zero evidence. By law, who's supposed to win? The social worker,
Mm-hmm.
You know,
because she has evidence.
I'm
You
sorry.
don't. Pardon me for interrupting, but go ahead, Georgette.
No. Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Jessica, do you know what I'm talking about? Evidence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually kind of had some stuff happen in my case where evidence was put in the report, but it was never acknowledged in court, if that makes any sense.
Thank you, Jessica.
Yes, and we take it to trial, and of course we get what we want right before trial. That's that's also something that I experienced in my case. And then I kind of wanted to go back to a question about the case plan. Apology letters. Have you heard about this being part of a case plan? Having to write an apology letter to your child?
No,
Yep.
I've never heard that before.
I have.
Oh, yeah, it's something that's happening.
It's happening.
What county?
right now,
What county are you from?
San Diego County.
San Diego.
You know,
And
we do a lot of.
I'll forward you my case plan, no problem, if you'd like. But
We do a lot of cases in San Diego, and I've never heard that before. By the way, if a judge ever ordered an apology letter, I would file an appeal. I don't think that's proper or legal. That's just my humble opinion.
And when I asked, because I was like, apologizing to my daughter, whatnot. So obviously it took me a minute to get a hold of my attorney, county appointed
But
attorney.
wait a minute, Jessica.
Yeah.
Did you appeal the order that made you write an apology letter? Yes or no?
No.
Okay, then when you don't appeal, Jessica, what happens? It becomes the 10 Commandments.
Incident.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't aware that wasn't, anyway, that wasn't brought to my attention that it was an option. We brought up the case plan. So it was a question that I figured I'd ask, because there might be people out there that needed your answer. So, yes.
But
Yeah,
you know
if
what?
I knew I could appeal.
Yeah, you have 60 days. If you pass 60 days, it's over with.
Got it.
But here's the thing, and I'm going to say this, and I know it might irritate Miss G, but I'm going to tell you something.
Don't say it, Davis. Don't say it. Don't say it, Davis.
You know something, Jessica? Most parents rely on their attorney to tell them their rights. Now,
Understandable.
in most cases, this is a court-appointed attorney who you don't like and who you thought did a bad job for you.
No. Okay.
Right? Now, when you think of an attorney like that and you rely on what they're telling you, whose fault is that? Yours or the attorney's? At some point, you have to take responsibility to educate yourself, because they're not going to tell you everything that you need to know. Well, how do you do that? That's a difficult question to answer.
No, I understand where you're coming from, and there was other things in my case that I was able. But we'll discuss that when you're ready to. That I was able to educate myself, I guess you could say.
Good. Good.
Thankfully.
Are you willing to share that education with other parents?
Yes, and I have. I have shared it with a couple other people that had cases that weren't aware what I was, that at the time that it occurred, I wasn't aware of. And it pertained to testing. It pertained to testing orally and it pertained to test. And then also, I guess another question I had for you is, how do you feel about nail follicle tests?
Nail follicle?
Yeah, you heard me. Nail
I
follicle
never,
test.
I never heard of that one.
They take your nail off from the
They clip your nails and they test it. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I touch a lot of surfaces with my hands. And yeah.
I bet here's something I bet you don't know.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know this. And when I've mentioned it in court, I get this kind of glazed over look like, what the hell are you talking about? Did you know that if you ever test positive in a CPS case, that you have the automatic right to have a retest? And that you have the right to have your own testing facility test the specimen, whatever it was?
I did not know that, and I was denied the funding to do that.
No.
Through the agency the agency objected to using resources for that case.
Well, you should have appealed that, because the agency is responsible for the retest, or they can't use the evidence against you. A lot of people don't know that and never mention it.
No, we got a chain of custody and there was no FedEx number.
I'm not talking about chain of custody. I'm just talking about actual results.
No, I understand, but what was fought for was a chain of custody, and the chain of custody was returned with no FedEx tracking number.
You know, in criminal court, a lot of this chain of custody and scientific evidence and results, test results, it would be thrown out. It wouldn't hold water.
Of course.
But in juvenile court, all the social worker has to do is say, oh, she tested positive, and that's it. Nobody's interested in the procedure, the science, the chain of custody, the retest. Nobody's interested in that.
Why is that, Davis? Why is that, Mr. Davis? Why
Because-
isn't the judge doing checks and balances? Isn't that the judge's job? Or are they just sit there, wearing a black robe and sitting on their high knees, just letting the social worker, lie?
A judge has a lot of power in our society.
Really? Oh, wow.
And they can do what they think is best regarding this justice.
Really?
Yeah, here's what you guys don't realize. If you don't like what a judge decides, you have rights. You can take a writ or you can take an appeal. When I started doing juvenile dependency, I had a mentor who was a really, really good attorney. His name was Theodore Goodwin. I wonder whatever happened to Theodore. He was one of the top juvenile dependency lawyers in Los Angeles, probably in California. And one of the things that he told me, which I always remembered, was, sometimes when a judge makes a decision, you got to let him or her know that you're going to take it up. Take it up on appeal, take it up on a writ. You can't just sit there and be satisfied, because if the judge thinks that you're not going to appeal, they're probably more likely to do whatever they want. And they're entitled to do whatever they want. They're wearing the black robe. Our society has given them that power. And it's your job and your attorney's job to seek review at a higher level and let the judge know that you're not going to stand by and let them order hair follicle tests. I don't know if you know this, but hair follicle tests are unconstitutional in California. They order them all the time in juvenile cases. And the Court of Appeals has basically said, well, if the mother didn't object to the hair follicle test order, she waived it and she has to do it.
But when they object, they take their kids from them.
No, that's not true. When they object, they still will try to make you do it, and then you take a writ or an appeal to get it overturned. And then they have to go back to the old urinalysis. By the way, that's, plus or minus 5% incorrect.
So let me ask you, Mr. Davis, why doesn't the court-appointed attorney take these steps to
I don't
actually
know.
do the writ and the... No. I guess I shouldn't ask. Okay, I shouldn't ask you
I don't
why. My thing is this. Okay. They don't do that. They don't do their due diligence to actually help the client because they're going to get paid whether they work with the client or not.
Ms. G, first of all, I know that that's not true because I've personally witnessed court-appointed attorneys object to hair follicle tests.
Okay, and then what else? Did they do a red? Did they do a red?
I
What
don't know.
else?
I wasn't involved in the
There
test.
you go.
I wasn't involved in the case, but in that particular case where I witnessed it, the
Hmm.
judge said, "Oh, okay. Well, no hair follicle test, urine test."
Hmm.
So
How many years ago was that, Mr. Davis? Like 50 years ago, 40 years ago?
how about 90 days ago?
Hmm. I don't believe it.
Once the chain of custody issue came into play, my attorney contacted the agency and told them that the only way that they could test me is through UAs from that point on. I had already done 3 different hair follicle tests that went back 9 months, the duration of my case at that time, that were all negative. So they went after my nails. My nails came back. I think 100 was the cutoff. They came back at 130. And then 3 months later, they did my nails again. And my nails came back in like an 1800 mark. And I had moved, relocated. There was no way there was any contamination I had not used. So that's when I was able to get my court-appointed attorney to basically ask for, bring up, we did a special hearing to get the chain of custody. And then once the chain of custody ended up happening and it was coming back questionable, that kind of just changed the ball game that's when, she refused to let me test any other way other than UA at that point.
That could have been nipped in the bud at the very beginning.
Yeah, I know. And it's unfortunate because a lot of from my experience and from what I've heard from experience, we get a call 24 hours or the morning of court to discuss our case when it's a court-appointed attorney. And they're doing their report, their notes as you're talking, and it's unfortunate. Just put it that way.
Like I said, they'll get paid whether they work on your case or not. So I don't agree with Attorney Davis, but he's been doing this longer than I have. I could never compare to him. However, my opinion on the court-appointed attorneys, they get paid. They don't get paid by you. They get paid by the government, the state. So their loyalty is not to help their clients. Their loyalty is that they're going to get paid whether they help you a day before, a week before, or the same day as your hearing. It doesn't matter. They're going to get paid. And I do disagree with some of the stuff Mr. Davis says, that there are some good people, some good attorneys, and there's some bad attorneys. I disagree. I believe that the whole entire system is corrupt. I believe the whole entire freaking entities of CPS is corrupt all over the United States of America, all over counties. And so are the district attorneys, and so are the judges, and so are the social workers. And I'm just going to stick with that.
Who killed John F. Kennedy?
Sorry, I wasn't born then.
Wasn't his last name like Booth or something?
No, that was Abraham Lincoln.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
that's what I was going to say. That was.
I was all like, I knew it was the one assassinated president. I don't know which one.
You were in the wrong century.
Damn. But I have something to say.
Go ahead.
I agree with both you and Mr. Davis. I know you're going to hate me about this, Georgia.
I don't want to hear about it, Cassandra, because I love you and I don't want to.
Let me mute her. Okay, what were you saying, Cassandra?
I agree with both sides when it comes to that, because it also depends on the people, yourself. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't communicate with your public defender and you don't try to ask them to do things for you, also, you got to hold yourself accountable for that also. Like I recently kind of realized that when I started texting my public defender and emailing her, and she actually got back to me, which was shocking to me, but she actually got back to me, gave me a lot of advice and gave me some, and it was like pulling teeth, but I finally got her to file my 388. even though she didn't want to because I didn't finish my case plan, I had to beg her to file my 388. But she did get back to me. And if you continue to like communicate, which you should communicate through emails with your public defender, if that's all you got, you know, and that's all I got right now. So I'm using it to my advantage as best as I can. And then you got to just do your own research and just contact your public defender every once in a while, maybe. Like, it's also up to you.
Okay, hold on a second. Georgette or Miss G is moving her lips.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, you know those moves, huh? Okay, I have a question. Because now now I need to stop you right there. How long has your case been open?
And it's been open for 5 years.
5 years, right? In those 5 years, when did you get somebody to actually acknowledge, and you have to beg for it, by the way? How long ago did she acknowledge your request that you had to beg for?
It was actually acknowledged by a social worker calling me because they can no longer get a hold of their father. And I had no idea who my public defender was because they didn't ever send me anything in the mail. They didn't ever get a hold of me. Every time I tried to get a hold of them, they wouldn't give me information. And then when their father went to jail and got incarcerated again, that's when they decided they wanted to contact me because they didn't have another parent to contact except for me. And that's when I started getting more into my case.
Right. But then, see, your kids are older now. So, but the 5 years has passed and not one of them could actually do their fucking job. So my point is this.
But I also never contacted them before because I
It
tried.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. When they take a case, either their heart is in it or they're not in it. Either way, like if one of our
Anyway, so Jessica.
Hi.
Jessica,
Yes.
did you have a question?
I guess another question that I had for you is, with my situation, I had got tested through I went through an outpatient that was recommended. And now my case is through this COVID era. So a lot of the classes were via Zoom, and they did oral swab tests. And the way they did them is they had us pick up the drug testing supplies, and our counselor would watch us do the oral swabs via Zoom, and we were the ones that actually sent the test out. And if the tests weren't refrigerated, and I didn't know this until I was able to basically did a Facebook page on a Facebook post on a Facebook page because I was feeling defeated in my situation, and I was able to get a drug testing expert, and I actually convinced my court-appointed attorney to retain her to do a report, and that's literally what changed my whole case.
Wow.
So I wasn't the only mom affected by this, but my test came back very low for methamphetamine, which happened to be my choice of drug, but there was no amphetamine in my system. A lot of people aren't aware that if you actually relapse and you do drugs, your body, crystal meth, so to speak, your body metabolizes the methamphetamine to amphetamine. So if there's no amphetamine in your system, that pretty much automatically shows that you're either taking something or it might not be a legit test. And I wasn't aware of that. I was just being told, oh, you came back dirty. I'm nothing worse than fighting for your kids, battling addiction, doing what you're supposed to, and you're getting accused of still doing what you weren't supposed to be doing.
You know what? You know, this whole drug testing issue is something that's always bothered me. because there's so much bad science in it. And sometimes you're so screwed by a social worker saying, "Oh, you tested positive."
And
And
threatening to adopt your kid out because you tested positive.
what about this? You know what, Jessica, I want to do something with you.
Okay.
I want to start um, an education program, and we can do them on these live streams about drug testing.
Sounds good.
Because there's a lot about drug testing that I learned over the years. And you seem to have one of those cases where, you challenged drug testing and it turned your case around, and there's so much bad science out there. And, it's because, the attorney or the parent, you weren't able to educate the judge.
No, it never got to the judges. It never even got brought up to the judge. We took it to trial, or no, basically before the hearing, automatically I was giving the next day my unsupervised visits to basically, continue my case in the direction I needed to go. But I'm sorry to interrupt you, sir, but I wanted to tell you the other heartbreak in this case.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter was the reason that when she was born, I had made mistakes while I was pregnant. I was truthful about those mistakes, but that's why my case started. So my daughter was put in foster care, and and my son was with his grandma because obviously I went into labor, whatnot. And I ended up being able to bring my son home, and he wasn't a part of the case. My son was 2.5 at the time, and I basically was getting him diagnosed for being autistic. So due to those false positive tests from the court-appointed services that I ended up getting kicked out a week before I graduated because of those tests. And they removed my son and backed me in the corner and basically told me that I needed to give his grandma guardianship of him, or they were going to petition him, and it wouldn't look good for me, and I'd end up losing both of my kids.
No, you're fine. You're fine. We're
Okay.
here.
Okay. So what ended up happening is I got backed into a corner because I didn't know how to fight this at the time. And I ended up giving her temporary guardianship through probate court. I never got my son back.
Wow.
So my son, and I didn't want him to get petitioned because he was autistic and couldn't speak. And because my mother-in-law is not a legal citizen here legally, they told me that he wouldn't be able to stay with her as a placement if they petitioned him. So in order for me to save my case with Riley and not lose Riley, my daughter, or lose my daughter, I got hand over guardianship, and now she has permanent guardianship through probate, and we all know how that goes.
Well, there's no such thing as permanent guardianship.
No, I know, but
even in probate, you can go back to court to terminate the guardianship.
Without her agreeing to it, it's not going to be very easy, but I know it's doable, and I do plan on doing that. Unfortunately, it's just this whole scenario is unfortunate because I was fighting for one kid and ended up due to false testing, I ended up having to be in this situation. And here now I have my daughter home, and I get unsupervised visits with no overnights with my son. So,
but that that's ridiculous, right?
It's
so
horrible.
What you should do
Mm-hmm.
is file a petition in the probate court to modify that probate order to either return the child or to give you unmonitored and overnight visits.
Okay.
All right. The way the probate laws are written, you have a slight edge in this case. How old is the boy now?
5.
So, that's what I think you should do.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I agree. And it is something that is basically baking in the oven. It's just unfortunate that it's sad that if I would have let him go to foster care, he'd be home right now, unfortunately.
Right.
You
All right, Miss G, what do you think about that? What I suggested that she Jessica spearhead some information and research, and we teach people how to challenge drug testing results.
I think that's great.
So, Jessica,
Yes.
this is what I would like you to do.
Okay.
Um, I would like you to go on Google
All right.
and research the top 10 things you should know on how to challenge a drug testing result in court.
Just in court in general or in dependency court?
Independency, right?
I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
I don't know. We heard something that Georgette was saying. I'm sorry, Georgette. What were you saying?
I'm sorry, Mr. Davis. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Jessica,
Yes.
top 10 things you got to know to challenge your drug test results in a court of law.
Got it.
Okay. The reason why I say that is because a lot of times juvenile dependency controls what the law is going to be. However, drug testing is one of those areas where the feds, the federal government, has stepped in and said, because of the important rights that you have, that controls the juvenile dependency court. Okay, so that's why I disagreed with Georgette about going this way, making you do your research in dependency court, instead going this way, because the feds control it. Okay, and actually there have been a lot of articles written, really good articles, about how to challenge a drug test. And there's so many articles about it because there's something in the law called the Kelly-Frye test, how to challenge scientific evidence. And that's really what a drug test is. It's scientific evidence, and the law has laid out for us the ways to challenge scientific evidence. And if you come at a judge and you say, hey, judge, under the Kelly-Frye test, blah, 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 the judge is going to have to sit up and listen. Now, granted, they may have never heard that argument in a juvenile dependency court, but believe me, it counts.
What's it called again, Davis? The Kelly fries, like French fries, or fry?
Kelly hyphen FRYE.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Kelly-Frye is not limited to drug tests, but in my opinion, it's easily applied to a drug test. You got it? Mm-hmm. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this step by step over a number of days or weeks. Jessica, you're going to tell us the top 10 things that we need to know. You might even find an article about how to challenge drug tests. I'm sure you're going to. And what we'll do is we'll take it and we'll post it for people to grab and look at. And we'll talk about it, and we'll, tell people, give them ideas, about how to challenge drug tests. Now, let me say this. This isn't going to work for you if you really, were using drugs and then you try to, get it thrown out, because you're just going to lose credibility with the judge. Right? This is for that situation where they came back with a false positive on you and you don't do drugs, and you're like, well, this drug test is wrong. So, we're going to show you how to challenge it. Okay? What do you think about that, Mr. Woodard?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good idea, because I'm one of those people that they just never drug tested at all, and then are just saying that I actually tried to go drug test one time, and then they told me that I couldn't at the facility that I was going to. And then they counted that as an automatic positive.
Right. So that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
That's more of a constitutional issue. The worker didn't arrange for you to do the drug test. then won't admit that she screwed up. So we're just going to stick you with a positive test, Miss Woodard.
Mhm.
Right.
Or if they didn't show up on time and or they went to the wrong facility, address was wrong, then they tell them you're automatic positive.
Right.
Also.
Right. Right. Okay, ladies, we're coming to the end of the show. Any last questions or comments you want to make? Miss Georgette Truan, Miss G.
Yes, Mr. Davis, I do have a question. Well, actually, not a question. Would you please educate the public real quick on how to do the bonding study? See, stop doing that. Now,
What?
see, now
I'm listening. I'm just
you're
listening to
literally
you.
smirking. Okay, seriously, this is
I have
serious.
my hands over my face and you say I'm smirking.
Okay. Yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. What advice would you give people who should be getting a bonding study with their children, but and when the social workers try to stop that from happening, so they can prolong their TPR? I mean, the process to get to the TPR to request a bonding study with their child.
Okay, so the number one defense in a TPR hearing
Mhm.
is that you have a relationship with the child such that it would be hurtful to the child, not to you, hurtful to the child if your parental rights were terminated.
Mhm.
Generally, you can prove that by getting a bonding study. There's some psychologist or therapist that interviews both of you and observes both of you, and they can write a report, come into court and say, you know what, they have a bond that shouldn't be broken. Okay, it goes a long way into helping you in your mainline defense in a TPR hearing.
Can
So,
I? Sorry, but I kind of had an issue like that they tried to go that way with me, and they ended up getting me a visiting coach, which actually worked out in my favor in the long run.
mhm. So that's when I think you should get it. And by the way, you should ask for this bonding study the day your family reunification services are terminated,
Mhm.
because the next hearing that's going to happen, 120 days out, is your TPR. Don't wait till the last minute to try to ask for a bonding study. Okay, it helps you more if you ask for it up front, and if the judge denies it, it gives you more time to take a writ to seek some type of appellate review on the bonding study. You know what I've noticed, and I should talk to some people about this. There's a certain county where it was admitted that after the termination of your family reunification services, that it's their policy to cut back on visitation between parent and child.
Mhm.
The reason why it's their policy is because if you have less visits or no visits during that 120-day period, you can't win your TPR hearing. So they, unilaterally change the order and get the judge or not give you your visitation. Because if you have visitation, then you can prove that you have a relationship with the child, that your rights shouldn't be, terminated. So, I mean, for me, that policy is probably a violation of your rights, your constitutional rights. But anyway, I digress. Georgette, Miss G, that was the answer to your question. Cassandra, did you have any question for me before we end this evening?
I'm muted
Nothing like
again.
being, yeah,
Anyways,
nothing like being unmuted.
I just didn't want to be rude. But yeah, I have a question, but I think I'll wait until next time I talk to you because it's going to be, I'll get off on another whole little.
Okay. Well, listen, write the question down, and tomorrow night at 7, when we go online, I'll take your question first and remind me that
Okay.
I said that.
Okay.
All right, Miss Jessica, did you
Yeah.
have a question? Go ahead.
When did you want, or I guess, when I do my research, go ahead and contact the same way I contacted originally?
No, today is what? Wednesday?
Yes.
Let's plan on having you back on the show and do a report for us on Fridays.
Okay.
Okay,
All
make
right.
sure you tell Grace though. Jessica, tell Grace.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, she knows. What am I saying? She's hearing the show. Okay. No.
All right. So contact Grace then.
See, it's right there. You see it, guys? Right there.
Or me. You could contact me too. Because
Okay.
See that? Cassandra, do you see that smirk on his face? You see that every time I talk? Every time I talk. Look right there. You see it? Does everybody see it? Does the world see this?
But he's so sweet. Look at him.
Anyway, I want to thank everybody, and we'll see you guys tomorrow night at 7. Good night.
All right,
Good
thank you.
night.